Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to get started here. Normally, Steve Love, my president CEO, would be here to provide the intro, and he was called away to a meeting and he sends his apologies. My name is Chris Wilson. I'm the communications director here at the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council. And we want to thank you for being here today for this webinar hosted in coordination with Konica Minolta, an associate member of the council. Today's topic is strengthening endpoint security amid rising cyber threats. This is a timely topic, especially with so many recent events of cyber hacking at the hospitals. Today, we have an excellent group of national experts, and we are looking forward to their presentation. We've worked with Konica Minolta now for over a decade, and they provided support in business solutions, technology, and IT services. They are valued friends of the council, and we're happy they could be with us today. To introduce our speakers, we have a special guest, Olivia Rogers Gilmore. She's an account executive at Konica Minolta. We have worked with Olivia now for, oh my gosh, several years, and she provides great support to our teams during our annual hospital events. Okay, and on a side note here, we are going to be taking your questions today. If you could type them in the question or chat box, we will answer them before the end of the presentation. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, here's Olivia Rogers Gilmore.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you again for being here. You might have recognized my name as we have partnered with the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council for years now, and we have printed the programs at the different luncheons and award ceremonies. And we have Joe Cisna here. He's our Director of Healthcare Solutions. He's been with Konica Minolta for over 13 years and in the healthcare IT industry for 27 years. He has a master's in healthcare administration and a background in interoperability, EHR, and workflow solutions. Also, we have Chris Bilello. He's our VP of Business Solutions Development. He has been with Konica Minolta for over 30 years and is passionate about the security of our equipment, solutions, and compliance. And then finally, we have Danielle Morrison. She's the National Healthcare Practice Manager for the IT division of Konica Minolta. She has an extensive clinical background with her BSN and RN in nursing, and she helps hospital systems make their systems and processes efficient and secure as possible so that their clinical staff can focus on patient care. Next slide, please. Yep, so I'll quickly run through our agenda. We're going to talk about HIPAA privacy and security rule proposed updates, Konica Minolta's overall security and compliance services, as well as our layered security approach to endpoint protection, which also includes your MFPs and printers. And then lastly, we'll do some Q&A at the end. Next, please. And then, we have many customers that are part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council, and we are thankful for each and every one of them. Our contact at the UT Southwestern Medical Center wanted to include a nice note about our partnership and how we have been partners for many years, and then they trust our expertise in securing their print devices, and so that they can focus on patient care and safety. We have many more customers that would say something similar, and we're very appreciative of UT Southwestern for wanting to give us a referral, and as well as our other customers. Thank you. And
All right.
Yeah, there's Joe.
All right, thanks, Olivia. Appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. We appreciate you taking time, spend this hour with us. It's challenging anytime to take time out of your day to do this, but we certainly do appreciate it. So we're going to start today's discussion around what's happening in the industry relative to HIPAA. And I'm sure that probably many of you have heard and may be aware of some of the changes that are forthcoming. Some of them are a bit maybe more imminent than others. But we wanted to provide some perspective around what's happening relative both to the privacy rule as well as the security rule. There hasn't been a real substantial change to HIPAA since the 2013 omnibus rule. And if you recall, there's been some slight modifications to some of the rules over time, but they have not been substantial in any way. And so the proposed changes that are forthcoming, or at least we believe they are, will have a pretty significant impact on the HIPAA law and fortunately and unfortunately, fortunately for the safety and protection of your organization and your patient records, but unfortunately from the perspective of the time that it'll obviously take your organizations to prepare for those changes. So depending upon how you look at it. If you remember the omnibus rule finalized the branch notification rule, it recall had more stringent financial penalties. It drew out the four-tiered penalty approach. There was also the work around business associates and making those organizations liable for compliance as well. So it was, if you recall, that was a pretty substantial change. But since that time, fairly minimal changes to the rule. So we want to start first with a perspective of what has been proposed for the privacy rule. And with that, I invite Danielle Morrison, who again she heads up our IT services division healthcare practice. And she is going to share with you what we believe is forthcoming based on the proposed changes for the privacy rule. So Danielle.
Thank you, Joe. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time today. So there have been several proposed changes that are on the horizon or have actually already been gone through some of the federal processes to the HIPAA privacy rule. So just as a high-level reminder, in order to make some modifications to federal rules or laws, such as HIPAA, is through a notice of proposed rulemaking or NPRM. And so there's been multiple NPRMs that were issued in 2024, and Joe will speak to some other ones that have taken place in 2025 already, and it's only January 16th. So, but the NPRM is overall, that's the federal way of communicating to the public that we federal agencies are looking to make changes to laws. So it's a different way, a different process than some of what people are used to at times. In healthcare, though, this is sort of how we guide and govern changes to HIPAA, whether it be significant, like Joe had mentioned about the omnibus rule, or just modifications to existing rules. And so one of the things that happens is there's also then a public comment period, and it's all of it. It's a process, and it's a long process. In some aspects, some of it quick. So this is where in 2024 there were a couple quickly proposed rulemaking changes that actually then were enacted in 2024. One of them actually was more, it's not necessarily on here, but it is part of the precipice for some of these things. To the amendment of the privacy rule was to strengthen protections for reproductive health by limiting the use and disclosure of protected health information around an individual's reproductive health information. And that's putting it out there that it can't necessarily be bypassed by obtaining a consent or certain authorizations, and then it can be utilized in certain manners for or against an individual. And that came about based on some other federal changes that took place around other reproductive health rulings. So that piece, that's already effective. Some of these other proposed rule changes that are here are strengthening and fortifying what's already in the privacy rule, such as covered entities informing individuals of their rights regarding PHI summaries. So that's adding to some of the information of already saying, individuals are supposed to be informed around their PHI rights, but it's pulling in some additional information, and it's utilizing and accessing leaning on covered entities, not just providers. The other aspects of these proposed changes are really trying to clear pathways for better, stronger, secure information sharing. So that way we can boost our interoperability and then keep it secure. So that's where they're trying to get better pathways for the sharing of PHI among entities. Another proposal that they're looking is the provider's response time to an individual's request and right to access. So there's been other modifications around information blocking. So lacking a right to access would be considered information blocking. And that's from a provider to patient aspect, but there's other information too that they're trying to take down some of the barriers for patients to be able to access their PHI, and it's meant to be done in a timely manner. So they're looking to put some other time constraints around that. So 30 days is what they're looking for, that you have to respond to a patient's request for access to their information. And there's other methods that are coming out too around patients being able to access their information in the way that they deem fit. Used to be sort of where you printed documents and even occasionally charged patients for them. They're looking for other means to be able to get patients access to their information, which is it's a shift from how things used to be. And it's an adjustment for providers to be able to have that information ready. The other aspects of things are around requiring of confirmation of privacy notice. They removed the written requirement, which is great. We are in a world now where we try not to have everything written. We try to move away from certain paper aspects. So removing this privacy notice provision is going to be beneficial. And the last two things, which I think are great around the privacy rule from a clinical aspect, is including care coordination in our healthcare delivery. Care coordinators used to sort of be left in the dark at times. They weren't always considered part of the care delivery team. So when they were requesting access to PHI or trying to manage and deliver things around PHI, there was often some confusion or denials or limitations. So these last two bullet points here really open the door for care coordination, which in the end improves overall patient care. So these are, I think, two great aspects to make some changes to the HIPAA privacy rule. So next, I'm going to pass this back over to you, Joe, to talk about the security rule updates.
Thanks, Danielle. Before you drop there or turn off your camera. So, I mean, obviously these are some of, as you said, some of these are moving more quickly maybe than others. But when it becomes, law, it seems to me that there's going to be a fair amount of organizational readiness, policy, procedure changes. So there's going to be a fair amount of work that's going to need to happen, obviously. I know everybody in this call recognizes and knows that, but I would imagine it's going to be kind of a mind shift in a lot of circumstances for our healthcare customers.
It is. It'll be definitely some adjustment. Some of it may be a policy and procedure adjustment or an update to your policies and procedures, but some of these also around the information blocking or patients access, there will be some technical and security changes and concerns and considerations in order to implement. Yes,
yeah, for
exactly.
Sure. Thanks very much, Danielle.
Okay.
So now let's move on to the security rule change, but just as a kind of to underpin that, and I know you probably are actually a little bit tired of hearing about all of the cyber attacks. I'm only going to spend a moment. I just include this very high level as a way to sort of guide the conversation that's going to follow here in a moment. And I think the two on here that kind of jump out at me is the second bullet point, that nearly 167 million patient records have been exposed or stolen over the last few years. And there's been a 950% increase in breached healthcare records over that period of time. So it's almost not daily. It's almost it's really a weekly occurrence these days. And I know personally, I've had I've received the letters probably twice over the past year. So it's hard to feel safe, no matter how safely we or how many steps we think that we're taking to secure our data. There's always somebody out there looking for the next possible hole in the organization. So, but anyway, so it's just something that we have to deal with, and that is actually the reason for these proposed changes. So, in 2023, towards the end of the year, the Department of Health and Human Services proposed these, what they refer to as cybersecurity performance goals, or CPGs. And this slide, or this image, I actually borrowed it from a paper that you can download from HHS, and the link is here, and we will provide the deck for everybody here at the end of the discussion today. And so these were a kind of the the final recommendations based on a work group that were trying to determine what needed to happen to better prepare our organizations for cyber events, both to prepare, to mitigate when they happen and as they're happening, and to recover. And so they based it on these sort of 5 pillars in these five rows. So across those pillars, to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, they spelled out these essential and these enhanced goals. So things like mitigating known vulnerabilities inside of your organization, and then an enhanced goal of ongoing cyber security testing and centralized log collection, things of that nature. And there was, rolling into 2024, these were recommendations that were put forth, not as requirements, not as part of HIPAA, as we know, but just recommendations that organizations take. And I'm sure many of you are probably already doing, many or some of these things. But these were, based on the work group's, recommendations. These were the things that they thought were essential for organizations to better prepare and respond to the cyber events that just seem to continue to come, on an ongoing basis. There was also in 2024 legislation that was put forth. It was a bipartisan piece of legislation called the Healthcare Cybersecurity Resiliency Act of 2024 that spoke to the need for better preparation for cybersecurity. It spoke to many of these CPGs, potential increased fines and proactive compliance audits and those kinds of things. So all of that is in proposed stages. Nothing has been completely put through yet. But anyway, so that was all being worked on over the last 12 months. So these CPGs, as I mentioned, came out over 2024. And then if you saw any of the news over the course of last year, especially towards kind of the last quarter of the calendar year, you started to see that they were working on proposed security rule changes or updates to HIPAA. And again, nothing substantial had been changed to HIPAA since 2013. So, it's time. So on December 27th, as it turns out, the Office for Civil Rights, OCR, and that's the part of HHS that administers and manages and enforces HIPAA, put forward this potential, these new security rules for HIPAA. And as Danielle described earlier, these are, as with the privacy rules, the security rules are now in the notice for proposed rulemaking, and they are now currently in the 60-day comment period, which began on 1/6, and it'll end on March 7th. So the Federal Register, which is where this screenshot comes from, for this proposed security rule change is posted. You are able to go on, if you see down there in the green, to submit a public comment. So they'll have the new rules posted that you can review, and they take all of those comments. Again, I put the links to all of these so that you'll have this once you receive the deck. This one is for the Federal Register, and the one on the left, this is to HHS, and this is just sort of the proposed new requirements. And there's, I think, 19 in total that they spell out. And I have a few on here. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but just a couple. One of the first ones is, if you are familiar with the way that HIPAA is written today, the implementation specifications are listed as required or addressable. And the purpose of that was to attempt to make HIPAA flexible for organizations. And there are arguments on both sides of the table that everything should be required. And then those that say that it doesn't necessarily apply or make sense in every circumstance for every organization. And the difference is that if an organization thought they, for whatever reason, were not able to implement the requirement, they could propose an alternate solution, or they could even not implement anything, but all of that would have to be documented based on things like current risk analysis, risk strategy assessment, and all of that. But the one of the rules is to remove that distinction, and everything would be required. The next one that I just wanted to point out, because this is actually aligns pretty well with what Chris is going to share with you, is how regulated entities, which that's defined by covered entities, yourself and people like Konica Minolta, which are your business associates, they refer to them as regulated entities, how they're going to establish and deploy technical controls for relevant electronic information systems, including workstations. And if you know Konica Minolta, and I assume some of you do, you know, our core competency is our print devices, all of the IT solutions around those devices, and the management around those devices. On HHS, if you go and take a look, they have a reference to the Federal Trade Commission, which defines workstations as obviously computers, laptops, all of that, but also any other smart device that connects to a network, such as like a multifunction print device. And they talk about new express requirements to doing things like deploying anti-malware protection, removing extraneous software, disabling network ports in accordance with the entity's risk analysis. All of that is part of what we refer to as our layered security approach, and Chris is going to share that with you. The only other thing that I want to point out is that there's going to be more specificity around things like risk assessments. Currently in the HIPAA law today, it states that it needs to happen once a year, every 12 months. It's not as definitive as it could be. And so they're going to be, I think, much more spelled out moving forward. So hopefully they can eliminate and minimize some of the gray area. And part of the reason for that is that the number of HIPAA violations that have happened over the last few years, one of the leading causes of that is either a risk analysis was not done, or it was and the gaps weren't remediated, or something of that nature. So that is a big that is a big component of HIPAA violations. So I want to sort of switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to be handing it off here to Chris in just a moment to talk to you about our layered security approach. But I just wanted to point out the fact that, I mentioned that Konica Minolta, we are known for our print devices, our multifunction print devices, all of the document workflow efficiency solutions around those devices. But we also provide a number of other solutions and services, and I really want to just speak to it from the perspective of security. So we have an intelligent video security offering and team that manages video security. Danielle, as we mentioned, is with us from our managed IT services, and they do all of the services that you might imagine a national managed IT services provide, along with things like security services, so penetration testing, offensive and defensive security testing services, compliance services. So we provide HIPAA risk assessment services, and then cloud, and then finally our MFP device security. And when I see MFP, or if any of the rest of us use that acronym, it stands for multifunction print devices. So I realized I said that and I didn't spell it out, so I wanted to make sure I did that. So with that, we want to talk to you about our endpoint security, layered security approach. And I put this actually right before that discussion, because I just wanted to point out the fact that we hear so much about cyber attacks that often are, ransomware, malware, the way that you might imagine those to happen. But the print environment is also a vulnerability if it's not sufficiently protected. Some of you may have heard of the print nightmare vulnerability, where attackers actually exploited a known vulnerability and injected code that got into the network to the PCs through insecure printer services. I don't like to name organizations because they already have to go through enough when they have a breach, and we know that ultimately it happens to most of us. Affinity Health, this happened quite some time ago, but the reason I included it is because in addition to hardening your networks and devices to prevent things like attacks, you also have to think through what you do with things like printers and multifunction devices and other networks devices that have hard drives that could potentially have data on it, and make sure that when you have an end of life or an end of lease, that there is a process that you follow to make sure that there is no residual data left on those devices. That's what happened with Affinity. They had a fleet of photocopiers that they end of lifed. There was an investigation done on those devices, and it was found that almost 350,000 patients information was still left on those hard drives. There ultimately was a $1.2 million settlement over that. And then a very similar thing that happened at the NHS in the UK. The only other thing I wanted to point out is this was not a malicious hack. This was an ethical hack that an organization went out just a few years ago and looked for printers out anywhere in any business, healthcare included, that they could potentially exploit. And basically what they did is they got into those printers and just had them print off a document that said, hey, I was able to get to your printer. You might want to take care of that. So it is a vulnerability. It's often not one that's always thought of. And I want to now hand it to Chris Bilello to walk you through our layered security model to do just that. Chris?
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I work for Konica Minolta at the corporate office. I've been involved with device and document security for over 20 years. I work directly with our CISO and our general counsel pertaining to info security questionnaires that come from customers and potential vulnerabilities and breaches and things like that. I could say that from the Konica Minolta perspective, our devices out there, whether it be healthcare or any other industry, we haven't suffered, and I'm not going to wood here by my desk, a public facing breach on our devices where patient records were exposed, specifically here for healthcare, whether it be during the life of a contract or after the end of a lease or a contract, like Joe said. However, I have been involved in situations where a healthcare provider, and it's just come up maybe once a year, once every 18 months, there was, and I'll call it a breach, maybe breach is not the right word, where the healthcare provider or the service provider, whether it be an OEM like a Konica Minolta or a dealer service partner, they did not conduct a wipe of the hard drive, or now we have solid state drives on these devices. And because there wasn't an overwrite or a wipe of that storage device in that MFP or copy or printer, whatever you want to call it, and it left the premises to go to the next life of its existence, maybe, a third party for, an aftermarket, and that was that Affinity Health. Those devices were found in a warehouse where they were being staged to go to secondary market. And part of that Omnibus 2013 rule not only calls out service providers and business associates like Konica Minolta, but also leasing companies. So the leasing companies also at risk if they fail to provide fail safes to protect the storage on these devices. My point is that every once in a while it does come up where either the wipe didn't happen or that hard drive or solid state drive now was not encrypted. So all that being said, we Konica Minolta last year we created this layered security model, and even though it's geared towards multifunction printers, it can be applied to anything that's an endpoint device on your network, anything with storage, permanent storage, non-volatile, as they say, anything that maybe either captures or transmits confidential, whether it be patient information or PII in general, they would fall under. Those devices could fall under this layered security model. I'm not going to go through all of the bullets here. I have slides forthcoming that go through it a little bit more detail, but we start out with the basic security, which, at the end of the day, we protect the storage with encryption, and then we move up through, and all these things here that I'm going to talk about, for the most part, are described in the HIPAA security rule, and again, called out in the Omnibus 2013 rule, where we have to protect these devices together during the life of the contract and at the end of the contract. We move up from ID access and control to document security, and then there's data loss prevention. I'll explain what that means in a slide here forthcoming. And then there's the centralized security management of these devices as well. Next one. On the basic security, and I've said this to many customers and service providers, if there's anything that you can do, if you take care of the first two bullets here, then you're covered 90% of the time. If you encrypt the storage, whether it be on a legacy hard drive device, or now, like I said, we have solid state drives, and our solid state drives today have double encryption. Actually, the storage device itself has intelligence that self encrypts that solid state circuit board, that the non-volatile memory in there. If you encrypt the storage and you change the device admin password, like I said, you're 90% safe, because just by doing those two things, you would prohibit or inhibit somebody being able to get the PHI data out of the storage device or hack the machine. Above and beyond that, by applying these other layers, then you can potentially get to, I'll say 99.9%, because nothing is ever 100%. But on top of those two things, you want to make sure the device is set for automatic deletion of potential files. It could be a print file in these devices, or a scan file, or a fax file. You want to put antivirus software embedded inside the device. And then it's nice to have a graphical representation real time of the MFP security status. And we provide, and our peers in the industry also provide similar types of tools to let an administrator see, from a dashboard, a centralized dashboard, or at the panel of the device, like a iPad, the security settings and the ones that are enabled or not enabled. So that's important, because, you may have the devices that are secure or hardened at the beginning of the life of the product, but a service technician could come along, for example, and perform a service event and reset the machine. And when they reset the machine, maybe encryption is turned off, for example. So it's not only important to make sure the device is hardened when they come in contact with your networks, but also during the life of that product on your network. So next one, please. So second is access control, again, spelled out in the HIPAA security rule. Talks to, again, the old one, the 2003 version had, like Joe said, addressable and mandatory. Some of these were addressable, some are mandatory, but it sounds like they're going to go, HHS is going to go with all mandatory on a lot of these things. So authentication at the device for a user or an admin to get into device settings, for a user to maybe see documents, stored on the hard drive. Single sign-on for the device for a user, so it can make it easy. Typically today, 90% of our customers, healthcare or any other industry, they use their badges to badge into the device that's tied back to an Active Directory system, or Imprivata or Okta, for multi-factor authentication. And that badge not only lets them into the device to make a copy or send a fax or send a scan, but also on-demand releases a print job, which, by the way, that authentication and print release at the device, that actually takes care of a serious HIPAA violation, where you may see in any healthcare entity, big or small, patient records sitting in the output tray of these devices, whether it be a fax, incoming fax, or a print job that's left there inadvertently. So the single sign-on and the authentication of the device is key, just to locking down documents that don't sit on the output tray for anybody to walk along and pick them up. And that's the last bullet there, that secure, what we call pull printing. We say pull printing because this software enables anybody on the network to walk up to any device, and if it's set up that way, and release the job on demand. So if I was going to a printer or an MFP outside my office and was jammed or down or busy, and I needed the document on demand, I could walk down to the next hall or the next office, and then badge into that device and walk away with my document safe and securely. Next one, please. So then we come into document security. So ultimately, what we're talking about here when we mention EPHI or PHI or any kind of PII, it's ultimately in the form of a document, whether it be paper or digital. So part of the layer of security is to protect the document security by doing things like if there's a secure print queue, whether it be on a server within your organization, or now a lot of our clients are going to cloud for print release, that those inactive files in that secure print queue are automatically deleted. And most of the software that's available today provides fail-safe to automatically delete a document after a specified period of time to make sure that there's no risk on a document that may be sitting in a queue, a print queue, for weeks at a time. Also, it's important, we hear this from a lot of customers, encrypting of the print jobs we're transmitting over the network. It depends upon the organization and the types of documents. It's not, the printing, encrypting of print jobs is not mandatory for HIPAA. The encryption is more for distribution of, I'll say, scanning of documents, but it's also, it's a nice checkbox to say you're able to encrypt print jobs over the wire, because you could have somebody, eavesdropping or sniffing on a network, and potentially they could hijack a print job in transit from a workstation to the MFP. And then this one is really important as well. The audit trail. It's audit trail of the document, audit trail of activity of the device, because part of the HIPAA assessment may be that, you may be assessed in your environment, and the auditor may say, I want to see an audit trail on this MFP. I want to see what documents were printed, who sent them, where they went to, and the ultimate event on the document either being printed or deleted, like I mentioned earlier. And then there's also watermarking of sensitive documents. We actually provide software, and I know this varies from state to state, where we can watermark, for example, secure prescription printing. We follow guidelines set by the entities that govern prescription print on demand for plain paper. I don't know if the state of Texas allows that or not, but we have those types of solutions as well. And then we have two more here, data loss prevention. So what's to stop somebody, for example, in a hospital setting is a perfect environment where I may have access to a patient, there's a VIP, whether it be government or in a public limelight, and that patient information I could potentially sell to a third party. How do I get it outside of the healthcare realm? Well, I could scan it. I could scan it to somewhere. I could fax it outside the premises. So document level integration of Konica Minolta BizHub activity. We actually provide software that's sitting transparent to the users underneath that monitors the documents that are printed, scanned, faxed, or copied at the document, and monitors for keywords, names, text strings. It could be social security numbers, could be patient ID, could be healthcare information, what have you. And it would actually alert an administrator that Chris Bilello stood at this machine at this time and date and sent the fax of a patient record of a celebrity or a government official. And it would flag the IT people to let them know that that event happened. And you actually could get a copy of the document that was sent outside the organization. And then last but not least, we have the centralized management. One more. So this, I mentioned this earlier. So all the things that I've talked about are important to have, but you need the tools to monitor, and ideally real-time monitoring of the device security and network settings. And like I said, it's not just Konica Minolta. A lot of the OEMs provide tools. Ours happens to be one of the only pure cloud-based tools that actually provides you with a dashboard where you can see the entire fleet of Konica Minolta MFPs and printers and see the settings of those devices in real time and generate reports. So if there was a HIPAA audit, you can go to that dashboard, print out a report, and you can get in real time the report of the document, device, and network settings on that device in case there was an audit. And also the software will automatically remediate, again, that event of a service provider or technician had to reset the device and forgot to disable open network ports or re-enable security on the hard drive or storage device. This centralized management will alert an administrator that this machine is unsafe, and to a certain degree be able to put that device automatically back into that hardened state. And that's that last bullet, the auto remediation to fix compromised security policy settings. And that's the last slide I think I have today.
I was talking and I realized I was muted and my camera wasn't on. So thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. So yeah, just in summary, we we have as an organization tried to align our security protocol um, to those requirements, by HIPAA, as we've understood them since, its inception. Certainly there could be some new things that we may have to, make some adjustments on as we move forward, just as your organizations will, obviously have to do the same. So I wanted to call your attention to some assets that we're making available to you. As I said, you'll get a copy of this deck. We have a landing page that we created specifically for today's event, that you can go to. And we have a number of things. We have there's some, brochures and some videos and things like that. But we also have what I think is probably maybe the most beneficial tool, and it's probably the least glossy marketing oriented asset that we have on there, is our HIPAA and high-tech security checklist. And this basically walks through many of the things that Chris just talked about. And this is an actionable item that you can use just to conduct just a quick assessment on your organization to see, is our print environment, in compliance, or do we potentially have gaps, and where might those exist? So you can download that from this page, this QR code. You could use your phone and get to it right now, or this link here will also take you to that page. And again, you'll get that by virtue of getting the deck. And there's some other, I think, useful information on that landing page as well. So, Chris, that brings us, I think, to a conclusion. And if there are questions, we would love to take those at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would just like to thank you, Joe and Chris and Danielle and Olivia. This was a terrific presentation with a lot of important information for our attendees. If you have some questions, please type them into the question box. And we have one right here. Do we know the anticipated date for the final rule of the security rule and when compliance may become effective?
It's pretty preliminary because it's just now in the comment period, and so that lasts, as I mentioned, 60 days. And then, upon the completion of the comment period, there's and its publication, and the publication could be, months away. Then it's usually compliance dates like 180 days after that. So it's still, preliminary. But and you also, it's difficult to assess because there's a new administration. So they'll could potentially be some changes, or could, either expedite things or slow things down. It's hard to know, but it does appear that there is pretty strong bipartisan support for updates to it. So I think that the general thought is that it will happen sometime inside this calendar year.
Okay, we have another one here. Does Konica Minolta provide any IT security and/or compliance services that could address these changes?
We do. I don't know if you remember when we were kind of going through kind of that overall, view of what we do. So we have certainly solutions and things that we can apply around our devices that could, as Chris kind of walked through, that could respond to that. But we also have, as part of our managed IT services division, we have a security services team that does things like penetration testing and offensive and defensive services around security, and then a full compliance team as well. So yes. Danielle, I don't know if you probably could have answered that more elegantly than I just did, but if you have anything to add to that, please do.
No, you did. You did just fine. You got it all.
Okay.
All right, I have another question here. Are there any capabilities to monitor what is printed, faxed, shared on your MFPs to potentially prevent or mitigate HIPAA violations?
There are, if you recall, Chris Bilello's kind of review of our security model, that was when he described the ability for, if somebody were to go to one of our multifunction print devices and let's say scan a document, we have the ability to audit that activity. So whether it's scanned, faxed, printed, we get an audit file of, who did it at what time at what device. And then it also provides an actual image of that document. And we can create alerts. So an administrator would then be able to monitor those alerts, and we can set it up to detect anything from a keyword, a phrase, a number sequence, like a social security number or an MRN number or something like that. And it would detect any of those, words, phrases, or characters, and then send an alert to that administrator. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the person did anything wrong. It's just that the organization can make a determination. What do I want to know, about what people are doing at those devices? And you can also, there are ways, and I know that alert fatigue is a big deal in healthcare. And there's, you get a lot of alerts from a lot of different systems. So there are ways to offset that inside of that solution so that we can, if we know that there are certain teams that they do this as just part of their normal business, and the administrator doesn't want to be alerted every single time somebody does that, we have ways to manage it as well. So.
Okay, I got another question here. I'm going to read it verbatim. This is Dr. Mary Teets. I teach health informatics at UT Arlington. I teach about the CMS requirement for the SAFER guides, safety assurance factors for EHR resilience. Does the content you provide today overlap with this guide at all?
I would love to say that yes, it does. I'll have to say, and I might have to phone a friend. I'm not sure I can answer that question. It's a wonderful question, and I don't know if Danielle, if you would be able to, or Chris, be able to add anything to that rather weak response to that very good question.
It does apply in certain aspects around from when we're looking at the protections of PHI, which then comes again into the safety of the end record repository, which would be the electronic health record in this case. So that's where some of these aspects will be applicable around how, I know this is coming from the resilience of the EHR and the safety aspect, but it still comes down to how we fortify from some of the security rule aspects, how we fortify those EHRs, and then the patient privacy rule changes on accessing the information, that ties into that too, as far as being cognizant of that. If a patient's requesting access to be able to get into their electronic health record directly has to be taken into consideration anymore. And that's something that the EHR industry has to be cognizant of. So that way they can deliver to a patient the access to the record in the methodology of their choosing. So I know that's been a kind of a heavy lift on the EHR industry side, and they're trying to look for other gaps and other aspects around that. And then that other piece of that, again, is doing that securely. So it's not just giving access, but how do we securely do this? How do we monitor it? And then from other aspects of HIPAA, how do we audit it too? Because it has to be auditable. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, she replied here. She said, great, good to know about this. Thank you. So thank you for that answer. I got another question here. How would a health system with hundreds or thousands of multifunction printers monitor and manage the fleet without having to manually update each device individually?
Yeah, that speaks to, I don't know, Chris Bilello, if you want to answer that, because I know you kind of covered that in when you were walking through the different layers of the security approach, but you might want to speak to that.
Sure. So it depends upon the mix of manufacturers, the OEMs, as we say, original equipment manufacturers. So there's software that's out there. Some is on-premise, some is cloud-based, that provide an oversight of the settings, especially network settings of these devices, and the network settings go hand in hand with security settings, most often than not. For Konica Minolta, we provide both an on-premise solution and a cloud solution for, like I said earlier, in that layered security approach that provides a centralized management, whether it be direct network or security settings, and the ability not only to monitor, but to report back and to change the settings on those devices on demand or automatically. But it depends upon the MFPs inside the healthcare organization. Printers.
Okay, we got another question here. What are the newly prohibited uses disclosures of PHI?
I'm going to hand that to Danielle because that's kind of what she covered.
So there's three main facets to that. So it's prohibiting the disclosure of PHI when it's sought to be investigative in nature, and that's more from sort of a legal or criminal aspect of things. So that's where it's your protected health information. And this goes beyond reproductive. This is also for other mental health aspects, or whether you have a history of a substance use disorder, anything like that. It cannot be disclosed without your knowledge, or even by other entities, for purposes of legal aspects, or for to sought for investigative purposes when it comes to that manner. And then there's also two other aspects of where a healthcare provider or plan or clearinghouse, business associate, they can get a signed attestation, but it has to be, you have to be involved in the process. So that's the other aspect of where we can share that. And it also requires that healthcare providers support that privacy. So they have to have now a new policy. So healthcare organizations have to take into consideration, if they deal with reproductive health, again, substance use disorder and certain other aspects, that they write a new policy that outlines how they will protect this information. So that's where those sort of new facets come in around the privacy aspects.
What a great event today. We really appreciate Joe and Chris and Danielle and Olivia for you guys providing your expertise to our hospital members for our first webinar of 2025. This was a great event, and I just wanted to thank everyone for participating and everyone for attending. Joe, do you have any final thoughts?
I just want to echo that. I want to say thanks to everybody that was able to participate today. Thank you very much. It's a little late to say it, but Happy New Year. But thanks very much. And yeah, I guess it's a weekend to me because I'm off tomorrow. So everybody have a good weekend, I guess.
Thank you so much. I wanted to let everyone know that we will send out this presentation to everyone who registered for the event today. And we also recorded the event, and I will send a link to everyone who registered. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.